My name is Isabelle Hart. I'm 27 years old. And that morning, I stood in the grand square of Columbia University, draped in a jet black graduation gown, the weight of a gold medallion heavy around my neck, marking me as valedictorian of the public health program. In my hand was the speech I had rewritten 13 times over the past 2 weeks, every word carefully chosen to express gratitude without hiding the wounds I had wrapped in silence for the last 8 years. The May breeze swept through the rows of white silk-covered chairs reserved for honored guests, making the silver ribbons flutter like waves. Then the camera panned across the large screen behind the stage, slowly stopping at the front VIP row, where a polished gold sign read, "Reserved for Hart Family." 10 deep blue velvet chairs, perfectly aligned under the sun. Each one had a bold printed name tag. Mom, Dad, Madeline, Aunt Cheryl, Uncle Walt. I had handwritten each of those names and placed them on the chairs with every ounce of hope that even after all these years of coldness, distance, even mockery of my choices, today they would show up. But all I saw on the screen in front of me was a row of empty seats. No flowers, no people. Not a single watching eye. Just chairs, their name cards fluttering slightly in the wind, like a chilling reminder that I was still waiting for something that would never come. For a moment, the whole square felt too wide, too quiet. The sound of the microphone echoing my name pulled me back to reality. Valedictorian, Dr. Isabelle Hart. I stepped up to the podium amid thunderous applause, genuine applause from friends, professors, from people who owed me nothing but were still proud of me. And the ones bound to me by blood? They weren't just absent. They had chosen to bury my moment with a message cold, cruel, and laced with ridicule. Watching you pretend to be a doctor sounds painful. That came from my mother, the same woman who once told me, "Women don't need too much education, just know how to cook and marry someone stable." Then followed a comment from my sister Madeline, who was on a yacht off the coast of Bermuda with a glass of champagne in hand. "We'd rather be somewhere worth celebrating." I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just looked at those chairs one more time, not searching for presents anymore, but to remember, deeply, that everything I had tried to preserve all this time had been hollow for a long time. And perhaps it was in that very moment, under the roaring applause and the blazing screen, that I truly stepped out of the role of the good daughter and into myself. No one came. Not a single message of congratulations. Just a row of empty seats and an awakening I couldn't unsee. Have you ever felt like you were treated unfairly by your own family even after giving everything you had to prove yourself? If so, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, so I know I'm not the only one. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, a picture-perfect coastal city, serene and graceful, with white fences, old rooftops, and lavender gardens that make visitors believe everything here is idyllic. But inside the house on Meeting Street, where I spent the first 18 years of my life, lived a different story. My family wasn't violent or loud. On the contrary, every wound came in silence, disguised in words so gentle they barely made a sound but left marks like blades grazing the skin. In my family, value followed a strict formula. Be pretty, polite, presentable in the right way, and never too much. Madeline, my younger sister, was the perfect child by that definition. She had soft blonde curls, was crowned Charleston Summer Beauty Queen at 16, and had recently graced the cover of a local magazine for getting engaged to Lucas, heir to the most famous jewelry chain in the region. In my parents' eyes, Madeline was the pride of the family. As for me, Isabelle, I was the stubborn mind and the cold heart. I learned to read before kindergarten, won the state science fair in 6th grade, and nearly qualified for a NASA summer camp in 8th until my mother forbid me from going because that's not a place for girls. Every time I brought home a report card filled with A's, she would glance at it and say, "Don't show off, people will hate you for it." Whenever I excitedly talked about my dream of becoming a doctor, my father would clear his throat from the sofa and say, "Girls who are too smart have a hard time finding a husband. Women should know their limits." They never yelled. They just slowly stripped away my belief in my own worth, one dismissive comment at a time, year after year, until I always felt like I was too much, too demanding, too unrealistic. Meanwhile, even Madeline's smallest achievements, a photo that got lots of likes, a hair tutorial video that hit 10,000 views, were celebrated with cakes and balloons. She had her own room, decorated like a professional studio, and our parents even hired her a personal assistant to help with content creation. Me? I studied by the dim light of an old desk lamp in a shared bedroom, reviewing SAT prep while hearing Mom shout from downstairs, "Make sure the kitchen's clean before 9. 1. I kept my Columbia application a secret. I knew if I said anything, they would try to stop me. They had torn up my transcript once when they discovered I quietly registered for the medical entrance exam. "I told you not to do anything that would embarrass this family." That was the last thing my mother said to me that day, before tossing the acceptance envelope into the trash like it was garbage. I picked it up, pressed it between the pages of my biology book, and tucked it at the bottom of my suitcase. The very next day, I left home quietly. Alone. No tears, no goodbyes. Just one small suitcase, a canvas bag filled with my full-ride scholarship documents, and a fragile hope that one day, when I became a doctor, they'd look back and feel proud. 8 years in medical school were the hardest years of my life, years I will never forget. 8 years without summer breaks, without a full Christmas, without a single spring where I truly experienced flowers blooming in real life, because while others were traveling, gathering with family, I was hunched over textbooks in the library, turning page after page, learning how to save lives. I survived those 8 years on scholarships, research grants, and the small income I earned from tutoring first-year students in the evenings. I didn't spend much except for one thing I quietly saved for every month, depositing into a private account I named Someday. I never told anyone about it. I didn't dare hope too clearly for it. But deep down, I had always imagined one day, when I finally became a real doctor, when I stood on the graduation stage, I would look down and see them sitting there. My mother, in a pale blue dress, holding a bouquet of white flowers, the kind she once said were as gentle as an apology. My father, reaching to rest his hand on the back of her chair, no words needed, just his presence. And Madeline no longer playing the lead in every story, but for the first time, simply sitting in the audience, applauding for her sister. When the school announced that I would be valedictorian and chosen to speak at the graduation ceremony, I didn't hesitate. I opened the Someday account and withdrew the entire amount. A perfect figure. $11,000. The worth of hundreds of hours tutoring after class. The part I held back each month instead of dining out. The birthday gifts I didn't buy for myself. And I used it to buy first-class plane tickets for my mother, father, and Madeline, a flight from Charleston to New York, complete with airport transfers, reclining seats, and a seasonal menu. I booked a boutique hotel room near Riverside Park, the place I had gone alone to see cherry blossoms in previous springs. I chose a room with a balcony overlooking the Hudson River, where the sunset reflects gently every afternoon. I asked the front desk to place a bouquet of white flowers in the room before they arrived, along with a handwritten card. "Thank you for coming. This time, I hope I can make you proud." I even hired a designer to create 3 custom invitations on thick cardstock with a metallic finish, their names embossed in a classic serif font. Mrs. Elizabeth Hart. Mr. Gerald Hart. Miss Madeline Hart, placed in a small box tied with a slate blue ribbon. I wanted them to feel special. I wanted them to believe they were an important part of this moment, not out of obligation, but out of family. I also coordinated with the graduation committee to reserve a special row of seats with their names printed on individual navy velvet chairs. Reserved. Hart family. I did all of this in silence. No one asked me to. No one knew. But part of me, a small part, still wanted to believe that if I made it easy enough, beautiful enough, loving enough, this time, they would come. The day before graduation, I called. No one picked up. I texted to confirm their flight details, the hotel check-in time, and the already paid reservation code. No response. That afternoon, I tried again. The phone rang, then went silent. I told myself, maybe they're packing, maybe they're on the way to the airport. But as the evening darkened, after I had rehearsed my speech one last time and was preparing for bed, my phone suddenly lit up. A message came in. One from my mother. One from Madeline. Mom wrote, "Watching you pretend to be a doctor sounds painful." No greeting, no explanation. Not a single hint of emotion, except for a quiet contempt that sliced through me like scissors severing the last thread of hope. I read it over and over, trying to convince myself it had been sent by mistake, or maybe it was just a cruel joke. But then, Madeline followed up with another message. "We'd rather be somewhere worth celebrating, bon voyage." Attached was a photo of all three of them, my mother, my father, and Madeline, standing on the deck of a yacht, the blue ocean behind them, cocktails in hand, and a caption that read, "Summer starts early when you choose the right priorities." I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. Not because I was shocked, but because, for the first time, I had no words left to defend them. No way to protect them in my own heart. I sat on the bed, staring at my graduation gown hanging on the door, thinking about the bouquet of white flowers waiting in a hotel room no one would ever check into. And I understood everything I had tried to build with them had always been a one-sided illusion. They didn't forget. They weren't too busy. They weren't unwilling to travel. They simply didn't see my graduation as something worthy of their presence, and maybe they had never seen me as worthy at all. Not when I was a child. Not when I got into college. Not when I wore my white coat, and certainly not now, when I became a doctor. That night, I didn't reply, I didn't cry. I didn't call Amanda, my best friend and the one I always turned to when things went wrong. I just sat there in silence, watching the streetlight outside fall across my desk where my printed speech lay waiting, the one I knew I'd have to deliver tomorrow morning with a steady voice, even if my heart had just shattered into pieces. The next morning, New York turned unexpectedly cold, despite the calendar saying it was already May. Winds swept across the wide stone-paved courtyard of the main square where the graduation ceremony was held, tugging at my gown like a flag caught in a storm. I arrived early, out of habit, like someone afraid of missing something important. But this time, there was nothing left to prepare. Everything was already in place, the seats were perfectly arranged, the stage was equipped with a large LED screen projecting images of students being honored, and the VIP row 10 reserved chairs for my family was roped off with white ribbon, adorned with silk flowers, and tagged with embossed nameplates. Everything was perfect. Except the most important thing. I sat in the front row alongside the other honors graduates, eyes forward but mind drifting toward the right side of the stage where the section labeled Hart Family sat quietly in the sunlight. No one filled those seats. The deep blue velvet chairs had gathered a faint layer of dust, the edges of the name cards curled slightly in the breeze. I saw the tag labeled Mom sway gently on its thin wire hook, as if mocking me with the very hope I had once clung to. Classmates laughed, cameras clicked nonstop, people hugged each other in celebration. But I felt like I was in an entirely different place, a space where time slowed down, everything muted, frozen like a snapshot no one wanted to keep. When the dean called my name to give the speech, I stood up, adjusted my collar, and climbed the stage steps as steadily as I could. The entire square erupted in applause. Some people shouted my name. I heard Amanda yell, "Go Izzy," from the friends section. But all I could see were those empty chairs, not because I didn't feel the love surrounding me, but because, deep down, I was still searching for one pair of eyes, the ones that had once made me feel small to look at me, just this once, with pride. I began my speech with a simple greeting, my voice steady as it rang through the microphone. I spoke about our journey as a class, the long night shifts, the grueling exams, the first patients we cared for with trembling hands. I spoke about the moments I wanted to give up but never actually stopped. And then, I paused for a few seconds, my eyes drifting again to the right-hand side of the stage. Empty. Silent. I swallowed hard and ended the speech with a single sentence that hadn't been in the draft. Sometimes, the bravest thing is not chasing a dream but walking forward, even when no one is there to cheer you on. The applause erupted. The whole courtyard came alive. But I didn't. I left the stage to the sound of music, shook hands with the professors, took a few polite photos, and quietly returned to the dorm before the celebration began. I wasn't hungry. I didn't want to keep pretending. As soon as I got back to my room, I began removing each piece of my outfit. The honors diploma sat on the desk like an object I had no idea where to place. I looked at myself in the mirror. My makeup had faded, eyeliner slightly smudged from the dust and wind. I washed my face. Cold water. Quiet. No tears. Just a deep emptiness. A kind of hollowness that didn't come from missing someone but from the certainty that the ones I'd waited for were never going to come. Not today. Not ever. I sat down, dried my face, and stared at my reflection for a long time. My face held no shame. No sadness either. Only silence sharp as a blade, steady as stone. And then, I picked up my phone. My mother's message was still there, unread. Watching you pretend to be a doctor sounds painful. I didn't open it. I didn't delete it either. I just looked at that line one last time as if sealing a box that held something rotten. Then I turned off the screen, opened the drawer, pulled out an envelope I had prepared long ago but never used, and began writing something I never thought I'd dare to say. Thank you, Mom, for not coming. Not a bitter note. Just the first step toward closure. And right there, under the dim yellow light of that small room, I made a decision. I would no longer ask them to love me. I would no longer knock on a door that only opens when it benefits them. I would no longer hope that one day they'd think I was good enough. Because today, amidst thousands of clapping hands, I finally realized it wasn't just that they didn't show up. It was that they had never truly seen me at all. And if I wanted to live fully and with dignity, then the first thing I had to do was stop trying to be someone in their eyes. I had to become myself. And that alone was enough. The next morning, the air was still cold, but my mind was clear. No more doubt. No more hesitation between right and wrong, between anger and longing. I woke up early, made a cup of black coffee like always, and sat by the desk, looking out the window where the trees swayed gently in the morning wind. And in that quiet moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Not for revenge, not to reclaim anything, but simply to end a performance I had carried alone for so many years. A role no one watched, no one cared about, and no one stood to applaud when the curtain finally fell. I went to the print shop near the hospital, the same one that printed my thesis back in 6th year, and asked them to create a new copy of my diploma. Not a standard reprint, but the official version, with a gold seal and the embossed emblem of Columbia University. Dr. Isabelle Hart, School of Public Health, summa cum laude. I sat there waiting for nearly 2 hours, eyes fixed on every letter of the digital proof before giving final approval. Then I stopped by a small handcrafted frame store in the Upper West Side, a place I had passed hundreds of times but never entered. I chose a black walnut frame with brass trim, in a classic style, not flashy, but elegant and precise. The old craftsman asked, "A gift for someone? Looks important." I just smiled and said, "For the ones who didn't show up." Back home, I opened my laptop and selected the only photo I had from graduation, a picture I had quietly asked a classmate to take for me. The camera faced forward. A perfect row of empty chairs bathed in soft golden sunlight. Each seat had a name tag. Above them, a large printed sign read, "Reserved for the family of Dr. Isabelle Hart." A perfect image. So perfect, it hurt. I printed that photo on thick photo paper, 8x 10 inches, no color correction, no filter. Reality was already cold enough. Then I took a sheet of plain cream paper, trimmed the edges, and wrote by hand with a dark blue fountain pen, my handwriting careful, as if writing to the little girl I once was. "Thanks for showing me what matters." Nothing more, no blame, no explanation. Just one sentence. And maybe the only thing I've ever written to them without expecting a reply. I wrapped everything in a stone-gray hard box, the kind used to present commemorative plaques lined inside with white silk paper. The diploma lay at the center, the photo of the empty seats just beneath it, and the handwritten note on top. On the box lid, I didn't write, "From." I simply taped a small slip of paper, Hart Residence, 70, 1 King Street, Charleston, South Carolina. The old address, the place I once called home. The place of silent dinners and Christmases where only Madeline got presents. I went to the main post office on Amsterdam Avenue, selected express shipping with signature confirmation, and ensured the package would arrive by 10 a.m. the next morning. I even paid extra to receive an immediate delivery notification by email. When the clerk asked, "Would you like to include any message on the box?" I paused for a few seconds, then wrote, "Fragile, but already broken." He looked at me, about to ask something, but then just nodded and placed the label. Everything happened like a quiet ritual, not rushed, not loud, only the careful hands of someone sealing a chapter of their life closed, one piece at a time. That night, I came back to my room without turning on the lights, letting the late sunset pour through the window like a thin wash of color across the wall. I lay on the bed, not sleeping, not doing anything. Just thinking about the package, now on its way to the place I once called home. And in my mind, I imagined my mother opening the box first with surprise, then stunned, and maybe, something might stir in her chest. Not regret, but awareness. That she didn't come. That she had chosen not to see me. And now, I would let her see not through pleading, not through tears, but through a diploma, a photograph, and a single final line. Around 9 a.m. the next morning, I received the confirmation email. Delivery completed, signature obtained, E. Hart. I stared at that line for a long time. Part of me pictured my mother signing for the package, maybe still in her robe, coffee still warm in her hand, thinking it was a birthday gift mistakenly sent from some distant relative. Maybe she'd be surprised. Maybe she'd be angry. Maybe she'd cry. I didn't know. And strangely enough, I realized I no longer needed to. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't turn my phone off silent. I didn't say anything to Amanda. I just did one thing after getting that email. I stood up, took a small pin, and tacked the 8x10 photo of the 10 empty chairs onto the personal board in the corner of my room right beside the class photo, a shot with my professors, and a picture of me hugging my first patient during clinical rounds. Then I wrote in my journal, just one brief line for the first time, not to soothe sadness, but to mark a moment of irreversible growth. I no longer need anyone to show up. I've learned how to send them away. I didn't have to wait long. Not even 3 hours after the confirmation that the package had been signed for by E. Hart, my phone began to vibrate steadily like a creature stirred awake. First came a call from a familiar landline, the number of the old house, one I once knew by heart but had erased from my contacts long ago. I didn't answer. The phone went quiet for a few seconds, then lit up again. This time, it was my father's number. I watched his name flash on the screen, and what I felt wasn't anger, nor hope, just a calm observation, like watching a winter rain begin to fall. Cold, damp, and offering no promise of warmth afterward. He left a voicemail. It wasn't long, nor deep. His voice was dry, flat, like he was speaking while driving. "You're too sensitive, people were just joking." Was it really worth all this? I didn't play the message, I just read the short preview that appeared on my screen, then swiped it away. The rain had started. Not rain from the sky, but a downpour of delayed responses from people who had chosen silence when I needed them most. Then came a message from Madeline. The first thing I saw was an eye-roll emoji. Then, "Did you really have to make it such a big deal? It's just a cruise. Everyone needs a break. You can't always be the center of everything, Izzy." I read every word not to analyze, but because it was almost laughable. There was even something vaguely pitiful about it. In their eyes, a medical school graduation, a milestone that marked nearly a decade of sweat, tears, and sacrifice, was just a cruise, just something skippable, something not worth celebrating. Not worth pausing a cocktail, not worth showing up for. I still didn't say anything. Still didn't reply. I was just about to set my phone down when the screen lit up again, not a call this time, but a voicemail. The sender's name, Mom. I hesitated for a moment. A small part of me, very small, still wanted to listen. Still wondered if maybe this time she'd say something different. Not blame, not deflection. Not pretending she didn't understand. I lifted the phone to my ear and pressed play. The first sound wasn't a voice. It was the sound of shallow, shaky breathing. Maybe she was climbing the stairs. Maybe she had just been crying. Her voice came through weak and trembling, like someone lost. Isabelle, I got it. A long pause. Then came the sobs, raw, uneven, no longer able to hide the shame or the pain. I didn't think it would hurt this much. I thought. Another pause. You're still my daughter, aren't you? Isabelle, please. And that was where I stopped. I didn't want to hear any more. I cut the voicemail off, not out of anger, but because it was too late. Too late for apologies that come after the damage is done. Too late for tears that only fall when someone realizes they've lost what they took for granted. How many years had I lived with silent wounds, without a single word of comfort? How many moments had I stood on the edge of giving up, just hoping for a hand on my shoulder, a simple, "We believe in you"? And where were they then? I set the phone down on the desk. I didn't replay the voicemail. I didn't delete it either. I just let it sit there like a dried ink stain on paper. Impossible to erase, but also impossible to write over. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the sun had come up gently, and the tiny lavender flowers near the porch had started to bloom. The world looked strangely peaceful, as if that call had never happened. And for the first time, I felt a different kind of peace too, not from forgiveness, and not from revenge, but because I knew I had stopped at the right time. I had said enough, through action. And they had heard me, even if not with their ears, then through the silence in the photograph. Through the word doctor, they once dismissed, now printed in bold, centered on the diploma like a final declaration. I pulled out the envelope containing the original diploma and carefully placed it into a drawer, next to a draft of my application for medical licensure. There's still so much ahead to handle, to dream about, to move toward. But what's behind me I knew was finished. Not with a scream, but with a voicemail left unfinished. And a door I chose not to open again. After all the bitter accusations and fake remorse, I stood still for a few minutes, not because I was shaken, but because I felt light. Light, as if I had finally taken off a suit of armor I'd been wearing far too long. And in that very moment, I knew. It was time to cut the cord completely. The next morning, before the sunlight could slip through the thin curtain, I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and made a firm decision. I withdrew the entire $25,000 advance I had wired to the contractor, the one scheduled to repair my parents' kitchen roof. That money came from the $60,000 my grandmother left me last month before she passed away. I remembered her words just days before she died. "You'll know what's right to do with this money." So instead, I redirected that $25,000 to the community health center in the Bronx, where I'd be starting full-time after graduation. Exactly 1 week later, on a Saturday afternoon just after I'd returned from a long shift at the Bronx Center, exhausted, the dorm buzzer rang. No warning text, no phone call, just the sound of the bell, echoing like a familiar alarm from a life I thought I'd locked behind me. I looked through the peephole. And there they were, not surprisingly, yet still enough to tighten my chest, the three of them, my mother, my father, and Madeline. Mom wore a wrinkled beige cardigan, light makeup, eyes clearly lacking sleep. Dad stood with arms crossed, eyes cast toward the distance as if refusing to admit he was here. Madeline stood slightly apart, phone in hand, sunglasses slipping down the bridge of her nose. All three of them stood in the fourth-floor hallway, the same hallway I used to carry boxes of textbooks up and down for years during med school. Not one of them had ever visited. Now they stood there, staring at the door, unaware that I was watching them from the other side, until Mom raised her hand and knocked 3 times. Polite knocks. But urgent. As if they were waiting for me to do what I always did. Open first, smile first, forgive first. I opened the door just slightly, enough for my face to appear. Isabelle, my mother gasped, as if seeing a ghost. We need to talk. I didn't respond right away. I tilted my head slightly, hands still holding the door. My father sighed and stepped forward. We're family, Izzy. Nothing can change that. I let out a quiet, joyless laugh. Family isn't something unchangeable. Family is something proven through action, and your actions have already said everything. Madeline cut in, her voice still sharp as ever. You're overreacting. Everyone thinks so. Mom's been crying all week. That package you sent it was cruel. I turned to her, voice calm and steady. I didn't send the package to make anyone cry. I sent it so they'd see. So they'd know that I've stopped being silent. My mother stepped closer and gently reached for my hand, a gesture I hadn't felt in years. Isabelle, I know I was wrong. But you can't just erase your family because of one moment of anger. I pulled my hand away. Not because of a moment, because of a lifetime. A lifetime of being called dramatic. A pretend doctor. But now, I'm the one who actually heals. And you? I paused, looking at each of them. Still trying to patch up a torn reputation with apologies that came too late. My father's temper began to rise, his voice climbing. We didn't come for a lot of reasons, but you act like the victim. You gave yourself the right to change everything, move money, cut ties, embarrass everyone. I looked him straight in the eye, for the first time without flinching. Embarrassment is for those who actually showed up, but none of you even bothered to come. The only thing I saw shattered was the character of a family that chose to disappear the moment the spotlight turned toward their daughter. He clenched his jaw. The money your grandmother left, that was family property. Your mother raised you for 18 years. At the very least, it should be used for the family. I tightened my grip on the doorknob, keeping my voice steady. That money was meant to build a future. To open doors into a world where I can actually help someone. Not to fix a kitchen floor for people who abandoned their own blood. My mother didn't raise me, she restrained me. And she left me standing alone at the most important moment of my life. And now, you're all here, for the money? My mother trembled, tears welling in her eyes. No, I came for you. I just want to talk. We can start over, Isabelle, if you just give me a chance. I looked at her. I saw the deeper lines on her face. The strands of gray in her hair. The regret was real, but it was regret from losing control, not from losing her daughter. I shook my head. I didn't change. I just stopped pretending I needed you. Vec. Madeline opened her mouth to say something, but I raised my hand to stop her. Enough. You all made your choice. And that day, when the three of you posed on a yacht, raised your cocktails with a caption that read, "Celebrating what matters," that's when I understood. I was never what you considered worth celebrating. So today, you are not something I'll consider worth mourning. I stepped fully into the doorway, still holding the door just slightly ajar. The breeze from the hallway blew past, carrying the familiar scent of my mother's perfume, the scent I once thought meant safety. Now, it was just a trail of memory. You say we're family, but you only ever called me your daughter when you needed something done your way. And when all I needed was someone to sit in the crowd and clap. You chose to walk away. Not once, but for good. My father's face hardened. You'll regret this. Blood is still blood. I met his eyes, slowly. Blood is what flows in veins. But love is what people choose. And I've made my choice. I took a step back, slowly closing the door. My voice lowered, almost a whisper. You came all the way here for that money. But you couldn't come to my graduation. That says everything. You should go now. The door clicked shut. There was no pounding, no one called my name. Only the sound of footsteps fading down the cold concrete hallway. And something inside me, for the first time, no longer felt guilty for not opening my heart. I turned around and stepped back into my small room, the soft light glowing over the photo of Amanda and me smiling beneath the sign that read, "Welcome to Bronx Health Center." I didn't cry, I didn't smile. I just stood there for a few seconds, then poured myself a glass of water and set it beside my laptop where the medical license application sat already filled out. And in that complete stillness, I whispered a sentence not for anyone, not against anyone, just so I could hear it for myself one last time. I've become the person I used to dream of, and I did it alone. The Bronx Community Health Center was nothing like the gleaming hospitals where I had once trained. No marble lobbies, no brightly lit reception desks like five-star hotels, no fancy coffee machines on every floor. Every wall here was worn, every plastic chair in the waiting room scratched and scuffed. But I loved this place the way someone loves their scars fully, without needing to hide them. Each morning, I walked through the glass doors with the loose handle, down the narrow hallway where sunlight slanted through dusty window panes, and felt something rare. A sense of being exactly where I belonged. Not the brightest place. Not the place with the loudest applause. But a place where I could start again without asking for permission. I began my first shift wearing a crisp white lab coat, dark circles still under my eyes from overnight duty, and holding the coffee Amanda had picked up on the way. She came with me that morning, carrying a stack of folders while I held a wooden case engraved on the lid with my name, Dr. Isabelle Hart. When I unlocked the door to my clinic, small, just a desk, a worn swivel chair, 2 wooden chairs for patients, and a shelf of medical books, I took a deep breath. The scent of fresh paint, printed paper, and disinfectant filled the air. And I knew this was where I would build the rest of my life, piece by piece, from everything I never had. I hung my diploma on the wall with a wooden peg, right next to a photo from our soft opening. Me, Amanda, and the team of nurses all beaming, standing in front of a chalkboard sign that read, "Welcome to Bronx Health Center, where no one gets left behind." There were no empty chairs in the photo. No one missing. Everyone was present. No one came out of obligation. No one pretended. I stepped back a few feet and looked at the 2 frames side by side, as if looking at 2 versions of myself. The little girl who once tried to please people who never loved her for who she was, and the woman now choosing where she belongs, with her hands, her heart, and a clear decision. That first morning, I saw 9 patients, an elderly woman with arthritis, a homeless man needing insulin refills, a teenage boy from a Latino family who was depressed after being pulled out of school to help at home. I didn't have answers to everything. But I stayed with them, never checked the clock, never thought about productivity or metrics. I wrote prescriptions in clear handwriting. I called the pharmacy to ask about a cheaper generic option. I placed a hand gently on a patient's shoulder as they left, just like my grandmother once touched my hand long ago, saying nothing, and still making me feel safe. Midway through my shift, the receptionist handed me a note. Room 4, new elderly patient, mild shortness of breath, low mood. I walked in. A black woman with cropped silver hair sat curled in the chair, her hand resting on her chest. After a few gentle questions and a quick check of her heart rate, I began jotting down her medical history. She glanced at the name tag on my coat, then smiled. "You're so young. Doctor, do you have a family?" I paused for a second. That simple question used to catch in my throat every time, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many questions. But this time, I smiled. A real smile. Not tight, not guarded. I answered softly. I used to think I didn't. But now, I have people who never leave their seat empty. She didn't ask anything else. She just gently held my hand, and in her eyes, there was something deeply knowing, something that didn't need to be said aloud. That day, I finished work late. On the way home, Amanda greeted me with a takeout box and a question. "So, how does it feel being a real doctor?" I leaned my head against the car window, watching the streetlights rush past. I didn't answer right away. I just held her hand, squeezed it gently, and said, "It's not the feeling of being a doctor, it's the feeling of no longer having to prove anything to anyone." We got home, hung up our coats, and set the kettle to boil. The scent of ginger spread through the little kitchen. I opened my laptop and looked at the grant application to expand the community health center where I was proposing a new counseling room, free for young people. In the authorized signature section, I typed my name neatly at the bottom, Dr. Isabelle Hart, Maryland. There was no one left who needed to see it. No chair left to fill, no word left to justify. Just me and a life I built with my own presence. If you've ever sat in a crowded room and still felt invisible, if you've ever wrapped your love in effort, in silence, in sacrifice only to receive a dismissive text, a cold glance, or worse, silence, then know this: you are not alone. Not everyone is born into a family that knows how to love, but everyone has the right to choose where their heart belongs. And sometimes, family isn't blood, it's the ones who stay when everyone else walks away. I'm not telling this story to be pitied. I'm telling it to remind myself, and anyone who's ever felt the same, that you don't need to be accepted to be enough. You've been enough since the moment you stopped trying to prove it. If you've read this far, leave a comment. I deserve a life I don't have to prove to anyone. And if you've ever stood on the sidelines of a celebration that was supposed to be yours, share this video. Because maybe someone out there needs to know they're not alone either.